The first thing I learned about the galaxy was that peace was never as strong as it looked. My name is Maya Brooks, and I was the first human exchange student accepted into Helios Nexus Academy, the most prestigious school in the Galactic Coalition. Children from hundreds of civilizations studied there, including the heirs of ancient empires, brilliant scientists, military families, and even students from worlds classified as Deathworlds. Before classes even began, I found myself standing in the observation gallery of the Galactic Council Nexus. Below me, hundreds of delegates argued beneath a dome of crystal and starlight. Holographic star maps glowed red as urgent reports poured in from every corner of Coalition space. The oldest civilizations in the galaxy looked frightened, and that alone made my stomach tighten. Earth had joined the Coalition only recently. Most of the delegates barely remembered humanity existed. None of them noticed me watching. The emergency session continued for hours, yet every new report made the atmosphere inside the council chamber heavier. Entire trade routes had fallen silent. Diplomatic envoys had vanished without explanation. Then the Intelligence Directorate confirmed what everyone feared. An unknown extremist organization had begun kidnapping the sons and daughters of influential families from across Coalition space. They weren't asking for ransom. They weren't making demands. They simply disappeared, leaving behind damaged ships, disabled security systems, and enough evidence to make each civilization suspect another. It was a perfect strategy. Fear spread faster than any fleet. Ancient allies accused one another of staging the attacks to gain political advantage. Border patrols doubled. Military vessels gathered near disputed systems. Every precaution taken in the name of security looked suspicious to someone else. Decades of diplomacy were beginning to unravel because nobody knew who the real enemy was. Then Helios Nexus Academy appeared on the central hologram. The room became silent. The Academy represents every major civilization in the Coalition, the Director of Galactic Intelligence said. Our analysis indicates there is an 87% probability it will become the next target. A murmur swept through the delegates. If the Academy is attacked, another officer continued, the children of dozens of governments could die in a single day. Every surviving civilization would blame someone. The Coalition itself might not survive the aftermath. I looked through the observation window toward the Academy floating peacefully outside. From this distance it seemed untouched by fear, its gardens glowing beneath artificial sunlight while transport shuttles arrived as if nothing had changed. That morning I had walked those corridors with students from worlds I had only read about. We had laughed over translation mistakes, compared impossible foods from our home planets, and argued about which star systems had the best views. It already felt strangely like home. Now I understood why the council looked terrified. They weren't just trying to protect a school. They were trying to protect the future of the galaxy. And somewhere beyond those peaceful stars, someone had already decided that future needed to burn. The debate erupted almost immediately after the intelligence briefing ended. Some delegates demanded the Academy be evacuated before the extremists could strike. Others argued that closing Helios Nexus Academy would hand victory to terrorists without a fight. Every proposal seemed to divide the chamber even further, and every minute wasted gave the enemy another minute to prepare. Then, for the first time that day, I heard humanity mentioned. The human exchange student has already arrived, one delegate observed while reviewing the enrollment records. Maya Brooks of Earth. A second hologram appeared, displaying my student profile beside the flags of the Coalition. Several representatives barely glanced at it. One student, an elderly counselor, said dismissively, "Hardly relevant." Another nodded in agreement. Humanity has only recently joined the Coalition. Their participation is symbolic at best. A few delegates quietly agreed. Earth possessed no ancient empire, no legendary fleets, and no centuries of political influence. Compared with civilizations that had ruled entire sectors for millennia, humanity seemed insignificant. Most believed our presence at Helios Nexus Academy was nothing more than a diplomatic courtesy extended to the Coalition's newest member. No one imagined a single human teenager could influence events that threatened the entire galaxy. I watched from the gallery without reacting. Back home, Dad had once told me that people revealed their assumptions long before they revealed their intentions. The trick was learning to listen without interrupting. So I listened. They discussed fleets. They discussed treaties. They discussed probabilities. No one discussed the students themselves. To them, we were names on enrollment lists, political symbols representing our governments rather than ordinary teenagers trying to build friendships across worlds. Outside the chamber, my communicator vibrated softly. Welcome to Helios Nexus Academy Orientation Week. Classes begin tomorrow. I smiled despite everything. Whatever happened inside the council chamber, life at the academy was expected to continue as normal. For now, none of us knew that the enemy was already watching the station, and that someone, somewhere, had already marked my name for a reason no one in the council yet understood. The chamber settled when the speaker recognized the representative from Earth. Unlike the richly dressed envoys surrounding him, the human ambassador wore a simple dark uniform with no jewels, ceremonial chains, or symbols of conquest. He walked to the center of the floor without hurry, folded his hands behind his back, and waited until every conversation faded into silence. I understand your fear, he began. Any civilization would fear an enemy that hides behind innocent lives. Several delegates watched with polite impatience. Others barely concealed their annoyance. Humanity had been part of the coalition for such a short time that many considered its opinions little more than formalities. The ambassador continued anyway. Peace is not created when everyone is strong. Peace is created when the strong choose to protect the weak. The sentence echoed through the crystal chamber. No one interrupted him. If Helios Nexus Academy closes its doors today, the extremists will achieve their objective without firing a single shot. They want children to become symbols of fear instead of symbols of cooperation. We should deny them that victory. A military delegate rose immediately. Your proposal? Do not evacuate the academy. Whispers spread across the hall. Strengthen its security, the ambassador said calmly. Deploy additional patrols. Increase intelligence operations. Protect every student with every available resource. But let them keep learning together. If we abandon our future because we are afraid of losing it, then we have already surrendered. The silence that followed felt heavier than the arguments before it. I leaned forward in the observation gallery. He never raised his voice. He never begged. He simply stated what he believed, then stepped back as though the decision no longer belonged to him. For a heartbeat, I thought the council might actually listen. Then the first laugh broke the silence. Another followed. Soon the chamber filled with voices once again, and I realized the hardest battles were rarely fought with weapons. Sometimes they were fought with ideas. And ideas, I was beginning to learn, frightened ancient civilizations almost as much as unknown enemies. The laughter spread through the chamber in uneven waves. Some delegates chuckled politely, others openly mocked the human proposal, while a few simply shook their heads with the quiet certainty of civilizations that believed experience always defeated idealism. From the observation gallery, I could almost feel the distance between Earth and the rest of the coalition. It wasn't measured in light years. It was measured in trust. The human speaks as though courage alone can stop terrorists, one imperial representative declared. Schools are places of learning, not fortresses. Another delegate rose before the echoes faded. If Helios Nexus Academy is truly the next target, then every student should be evacuated immediately. Continuing classes would be irresponsible. A third voice joined the debate. And what of the human student? Earth has barely entered interstellar affairs. Removing all human participants from the exchange program would eliminate unnecessary complications. Several representatives voiced their agreement. One human schoolgirl cannot possibly influence events of galactic importance. Protect your own citizen and send her home. It is the logical solution. The words drifted upward until they reached me. Oddly enough, they didn't hurt. Back on Earth, I had grown accustomed to being underestimated. I wasn't the strongest athlete in school. the loudest student in class, or the smartest person in every room. My parents had taught me that people often confused quietness with weakness. Correcting them wasn't necessary. Reality usually handled that on its own. Below, only a handful of delegates defended Earth's position. They argued that removing one species would undermine everything Helios Nexus Academy represented. Their voices were calm, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. The speaker finally struck the ceremonial staff against the crystal floor. The council will continue deliberations. No decision had been reached. No agreement had been found. As the delegates resumed arguing, I turned away from the gallery window. Orientation at the academy would begin in less than an hour, and unlike the politicians below, I had classmates waiting to meet me. None of us realized that someone else was waiting, too. The academy felt like a different universe from the council nexus. Instead of tense debates and military projections, the halls echoed with laughter, unfamiliar languages, and the soft chime of class bells. Students hurried between orientation sessions carrying data pads, musical instruments, and half-finished conversations. If I hadn't seen the emergency summit with my own eyes, I would have believed the galaxy was at peace. My dormitory overlooked one of the central gardens, where trees from dozens of worlds grew side by side beneath a transparent dome. Some shimmered with silver leaves. Others glowed faintly in shades of blue and violet. A stream crossed the garden, carrying water imported from 6 different planets to satisfy the needs of every ecosystem represented there. That was where I met my first real friends. Letha came from a peaceful aquatic civilization whose people settled disagreements through years of negotiation rather than violence. She was curious about everything on Earth, especially oceans and music. Beside her was Kalen, whose species communicated with subtle changes in skin color as often as spoken words. He asked endless questions about human history and seemed fascinated that we had developed hundreds of different languages on a single world. By lunchtime, the 3 of us were comparing stories from home as though we had known each other for years. It almost made me forget the council's warnings. Almost. Late that afternoon, while searching for the engineering laboratories, I noticed something odd. 2 maintenance workers disappeared through a service door marked authorized personnel only. That wasn't unusual. What caught my attention was that the door remained unlocked after they left. A minute later, another figure entered wearing a maintenance uniform that didn't quite fit. The sleeves were too long. The walk was too cautious. Instead of checking equipment, the stranger looked both ways before slipping into the restricted corridor. Something felt wrong. I kept walking without changing my pace. Dad always said that if you stared at suspicious people, they noticed you. If you acted like you belonged, they ignored you. So I smiled at passing students, continued toward the library, and quietly memorized the corridor number. For the rest of the day, I watched. And the more I watched, the more certain I became that someone inside Helios Nexus Academy was pretending to belong. I didn't follow the stranger into the maintenance corridor. Curiosity gets people noticed. Observation keeps them alive. Instead, I spent the next several days building a routine that looked perfectly ordinary to everyone around me. I attended every class, explored every wing of the academy, laughed with Letha and Kalen over terrible cafeteria food, and pretended to get hopelessly lost whenever we entered a new section of the station. In reality, I was learning the academy. Every hallway, every emergency staircase, every maintenance hatch, every service elevator that could bypass the crowded main corridors. By the end of the week, I could reach any major classroom without using the public navigation system. No one questioned why. Back on Earth, those habits weren't considered unusual. Every student completed emergency preparedness training before graduating. Fire drills, evacuation exercises, first aid, disaster response. They were simply part of growing up on a world where nature regularly reminded us who was really in charge. My parents had gone even further. Dad believed that if you entered a new building, you should always know at least 2 ways out. Mom insisted I carry a small emergency kit everywhere I traveled. Neither of them imagined their advice would someday be tested in another galaxy. The Academy Library became my second home. Officially, I was researching galactic history for an introductory assignment. Unofficially, I was studying security architecture. The public database contained more information than most people realized. Power grids, environmental controls, medical stations, life support backups, even partial maintenance diagrams hidden inside engineering manuals. Separately, each document meant very little. Together, they formed a map. I also spent evenings reading biological records of coalition species. Different breathing atmospheres, different skeletal structures, different reactions to heat, cold, toxins, and gravity. If an emergency happened, helping one student might accidentally endanger another unless I understood their physiology. Letha teased me for studying so much. You humans never stop preparing, do you? I smiled. Old habit. She laughed, assuming I was joking. I let her. No one at Helios Nexus Academy knew that human children were raised on one of the most unpredictable Deathworlds ever catalogued. Preparation wasn't considered exceptional on Earth. It was simply another survival skill. The attack began so quietly that, for a few seconds, nobody realized it had already started. I was halfway through an engineering lecture when every light in the classroom flickered. The projector vanished, the ventilation system fell silent, and the instructor stopped speaking as the emergency lighting washed the room in a dim crimson glow. Then the alarms should have sounded. They never did. Instead, every student's wrist communicator displayed the same message. Connection lost. Confused voices filled the classroom. Some students tried contacting friends. Others attempted to reach the faculty network. Every request failed. Our teacher activated the emergency console. Nothing happened. Outside, I heard shouting. Then running. A second later, the entire station shuddered beneath our feet, followed by the distant echo of an explosion that rolled through the corridors like thunder. The power grid had failed. Someone had disabled it deliberately. The classroom doors slid open automatically, revealing frightened students pouring into the hall. Professors called for everyone to remain calm, but they had no information to give. Security drones lay motionless along the corridor, their optical sensors dark. They had been shut down. Not destroyed, shut down. I looked toward the nearest emergency exit. The indicator above it flashed red. Locked. Every escape route on the public map had sealed simultaneously. That wasn't an accident. Someone knew exactly how the academy worked. Panic spread faster than the darkness. Younger students began crying. Several species reacted to fear in different ways. Some froze completely. Others bolted down random corridors searching for another exit. Within moments, the orderly hallway had become complete chaos. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Fear narrows your vision. Dad had drilled that lesson into me during every camping trip and emergency exercise. Stop, look, think. The attackers wanted confusion. That meant the safest path probably wasn't the obvious one. I glanced toward the maintenance access hidden behind a decorative wall panel near the laboratory entrance. Most students didn't even know it existed. I did, and for the first time since arriving at Helios Nexus Academy, I realized all those quiet days of preparation were finally about to matter. I pulled the maintenance panel aside and waved the nearest students toward me. Most hesitated. The passage behind the wall was narrow, dark, and obviously not meant for public use. Another explosion echoed through the academy, and the hesitation disappeared. Single line, I said. Stay close. Nobody runs. Something in my voice made them listen. Within seconds, 12 students followed me into the service corridor. Letha stayed beside me while Kaylin counted everyone entering. The youngest cadets were trembling, so I placed them in the middle of the line where they would be protected from both directions. The emergency lights inside the maintenance tunnel still worked. Good. That meant the backup power network hadn't completely failed. As we moved deeper into the passage, distant gunfire echoed through the walls. It wasn't random. Short, disciplined bursts. Whoever had attacked the academy knew exactly where they were going. Professionals, I whispered. Letha looked at me. How can you tell? Wasting almost no ammunition. She stared but kept walking. At the first junction I stopped and listened. Footsteps, heavy, above us, not maintenance workers, armed patrol. I motioned for everyone to remain silent until the sounds faded away. Only then did we continue. A flashing emergency beacon guided us toward a sealed laboratory. Through the observation window I spotted 3 professors trapped inside. The electronic lock had frozen during the power failure. I examined the control panel. Mechanical override. Simple. Using an emergency tool mounted beside the frame, I released the locking pins one by one until the door slid open. The oldest professor blinked in surprise. How did you know that procedure? I read the maintenance manual. He looked too shocked to answer. We merged the professors with our group and continued through the tunnels, avoiding every major corridor. Twice we heard armed voices passing nearby. 3 times I altered our route before walking into them. Then, around the next corner, we found an unconscious figure wearing a maintenance uniform. Not a technician, a saboteur. And as one of the rescued professors knelt to secure the prisoner's restraints, the attacker muttered a single sentence that turned every assumption upside down. Forget the school. We only came for the human girl. For a moment, nobody spoke. The tunnel seemed to shrink around us as the saboteur's words settled into the silence. Even the distant sounds of fighting felt farther away. I stared at the unconscious attacker, searching his face for some sign that I had misunderstood. You only came for the human girl. The professor checked the prisoner's pulse before looking up at me. He may be delirious. Maybe, I replied, though I didn't believe it. Letha stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya, why would anyone target you? I don't know. It was the truth. At least, it was the truth as far as I knew. We couldn't stay there. I led the group deeper into the maintenance network until we reached an emergency shelter where dozens of frightened students had already gathered. Faculty members immediately began organizing medical care while security officers, finally restored through an independent communication channel, secured the entrance. Only then did I allow myself to sit down. My hands were steady. Inside, my thoughts were anything but. Hours later, after the attackers had been captured or driven from the academy, the investigation began. Every surviving saboteur repeated the same story during interrogation. The academy had never been their primary objective. It had only been the bait. Their true mission was to capture one student before Coalition security realized what was happening. Me. The revelation reached the Galactic Council before sunrise. Emergency archives were opened. Files sealed for decades appeared on every display inside the council chamber. Earth's biological classification. Human evolutionary history. Deathworld index. One delegate read the report aloud before stopping halfway through, convinced there had been a translation error. There is no mistake, the chief archivist replied quietly. Earth is officially ranked among the highest class Deathworlds ever surveyed. Silence spread across the chamber. The report described crushing gravity compared to most inhabited worlds, violent weather systems, dangerous microorganisms, powerful predators, unstable tectonic activity, and an atmosphere that many coalition species considered barely survivable. For the first time, the galaxy understood why humanity trained its children differently. I had never been extraordinary. I had simply grown up on Earth. The attack on Helios Nexus Academy ended before sunset, but its consequences spread across the coalition with astonishing speed. Every major news network interrupted its broadcasts. Every military command requested access to the investigation. Every government demanded an explanation for why a newly admitted species had been hiding so much about itself. I didn't feel as though I had hidden anything. No one had ever asked. Medical teams moved through the academy, treating the injured and comforting students who had lost friends during the attack. Letha refused to leave my side, while Kalen helped organize food and supplies for those forced to remain inside the emergency shelters. Looking around the crowded hall, I realized something that made me smile. No one cared which planet anyone came from anymore. Not after what we survived together. Meanwhile, the council chamber remained filled long into the night. The newly released archives overturned centuries of assumptions. Delegates watched recordings of Earth as hurricanes crossed entire oceans, volcanoes darkened the sky, earthquakes split continents, and predators hunted with claws, venom, speed, or patience. They learned that humanity had not merely survived such a world. We had built civilizations on it. Then came the training records. Emergency medicine, search and rescue, disaster response, fire suppression, evacuation planning. The instructors stared in disbelief. Human children practice these procedures before reaching adulthood? They do, the Earth's ambassador replied. Because on our world, emergencies are not extraordinary. They are inevitable. We prepare long before they arrive. The room fell silent once again. The extremists had expected to capture a frightened schoolgirl. Instead, they had encountered someone who treated a crisis the way generations of humans had been taught to treat storms, fires, and disasters, with calm decisions and steady hands. I wasn't stronger than anyone else at the academy. I wasn't braver, either. I had simply been taught that panic solved nothing. As the days passed, students who had once viewed humanity with cautious curiosity began approaching me for different reasons. They didn't ask about Earth's weapons or military. They asked how to stay calm, how to think clearly, how to protect others before themselves. For the first time since arriving among the stars, I felt that humanity truly belonged there. 3 days after the attack, the Galactic Council reconvened inside the same chamber where fear had nearly shattered the coalition. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. No one laughed when the representative from Earth walked toward the central platform. No one dismissed humanity as inexperienced. They had all seen the reports, the recordings, and the testimony of students whose lives had been saved by quiet preparation instead of impossible heroics. The ambassador waited until the chamber fell completely silent. Humanity seeks no reward, he said. We ask for no special rank, no additional territory, and no greater authority within this council. Several delegates exchanged surprised glances. After everything that had happened, many had expected Earth to demand influence or political concessions. Instead, the ambassador continued. Our world taught us difficult lessons. Survival matters, strength matters, but neither has value unless it is used to protect others. A new hologram appeared above the platform. It displayed Helios Nexus Academy surrounded by hundreds of worlds connected through bright lines of light. Earth proposes an expanded interstellar education initiative. Every civilization will exchange students, teachers, engineers, physicians, and emergency specialists. We should learn from one another before another enemy teaches us through tragedy. The delegates watched in thoughtful silence. Our origin does not define our future, the ambassador said. Our choices do. For several heartbeats, no one moved. Then the oldest representative in the chamber slowly rose to his feet. He began to applaud. Another delegate followed. Then another. Within moments, the entire council stood together. I watched from the gallery, remembering the laughter that had filled this room only days earlier. It was gone, not because humanity had frightened the galaxy, because we had reminded it why the coalition existed in the first place. For the first time since leaving Earth, I believed the stars could become more than distant neighbors. They could become home. The months that followed transformed Helios Nexus Academy in ways no architect had ever imagined. Repairs were completed quickly, but the greatest changes were invisible. New security systems protected every corridor. Emergency drills became part of every student's education, and cooperation replaced the quiet suspicion that had lingered between many civilizations for generations. Applications arrived from every corner of coalition space. Parents who had once feared sending their children to the academy now believed it was the safest place in the galaxy. They had watched students from dozens of species protect one another during the attack, refusing to leave friends behind even when escape was within reach. That example spread farther than any political speech ever could. When the next academic year began, the campus welcomed its largest class in history. Walking through the gardens, I heard conversations in languages I had never encountered before. Students exchanged recipes, scientific theories, music, and traditions without worrying about which empire or alliance they represented. Rival worlds that had barely spoken to one another for centuries now shared laboratories and classrooms. Letha often joked that I had become impossible to walk anywhere with. Every few minutes someone stopped to thank me. I always gave the same answer. You would have done the same for me. Some smiled. Others admitted they weren't sure. But I would now, they usually added. That meant more than any medal. A new leadership course also became mandatory for every senior student. Instead of focusing only on strategy and diplomacy, it examined compassion under pressure, responsibility during crisis, and the importance of preparation before disaster struck. To my embarrassment, one of the required case studies was titled The Helios Incident. It included security recordings, witness statements, and my own decisions throughout the attack. I never thought of them as remarkable. I had simply done what needed to be done. Yet every new class studied those events, not because one human student had survived an impossible day, but because students from every world had discovered that courage became stronger when it inspired others to act together rather than alone. Many years later, I returned to Helios Nexus Academy, not as a student but as a guest speaker. The gardens were larger, the classrooms busier, and the flags of new coalition members lined the central plaza. Humanity was no longer viewed as a curious newcomer. We were simply another civilization contributing to a shared future. An elderly professor ended the ceremony with words that every graduate would remember. We believed an ordinary human schoolgirl entered these halls. Then we discovered she came from one of the deadliest worlds ever known. But her strength was never what changed us. It was her decision to protect strangers without asking who they were. As I looked across the crowd, I realized he was right. Earth had given me resilience, but compassion was a choice. And in the end, that choice accomplished what fear never could. It united the galaxy.